Right, thank you all for coming to the Governance Committee on the Monday, the 27th of November at 5:30. Just to remind you where the facilities are and the doors if we need to escape the building. I have apologies of absence from Councillor Roger Nowell and Councillor Mike Croker. Other councillors who are not here at the moment are Councillor James Brooke, Councillor John Campbell, Councillor Jay Mercer. I'd like to get everyone's agreement to approve them as correct the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of September 2023. Anybody have any comments? Okay, can I have a proposer? Councillor Paul Clark and seconder. Councillor Bevis, thank you. Do I have any declarations of members' interest for those items on the agenda this evening? Councillor Bevis.
Yes, Chairman. Item 5, Planning Committee review. If some of these proposals were to be adopted, my position as Vice Chairman of Planning North would disappear. So it could be said that I have a personal interest in that, but as this is only for noting, I believe I can continue to join in.
Yes, you can. Thank you. Any other comments? No, thank you. So number 4 is the announcements, and I have no announcements from either myself or the Chief Executive. Item 5, the Planning Committee review, and I will hand over to the Monitoring Officer to introduce. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Both Emma Parks, Head of Development, and me as Monitoring Officer will present this item jointly this evening. So back in November 2018, the previous Monitoring Officer instigated a review of Horsham's Planning Committee system, and the Planning Advisory Service, commonly known as PAS, undertook that review. They put together a report compiling their findings, and they made a number of recommendations. So one of the recommendations was that the Council should consider reducing the number of members sitting on the Planning Committee. Another recommendation was that the Council should consider introducing a committee structure where at least one councillor in each ward does not sit on the Planning Committee, presumably the reason for that being to stave off criticism and suggestions of bias and predetermination in the decision-making process. The third recommendation was that the Council should consider moving to a single Planning Committee system, and the fourth recommendation that the scheme of delegation be reviewed with a view to reducing the number of called-in applications, for example, increasing the trigger in relation to call-in. So, following this review back in November 2018, PAS put together its recommendations, and the Governance Committee took these to full council. The Governance Committee recommended to full council that there should be a single planning committee comprising solely of 18 members. The council rejected that recommendation in favour of the present system that we have here in situ today. I'm now going to hand over to Emma Parks to make some observations in relation to the current committee structure we have.
So members will be aware at the moment we've got two larger planning committees covering North and South. There are some potential issues with that, certainly comparing ourselves to other committees locally and nationally. There's potential for conflict of interest between the role of a planning committee member and a local ward member, and that is apparent at some meetings, and it's understandable how there could be some confusion on that when you have all members sitting on the committee. As I said, our planning committees are significantly larger than other committees of this council, where other committees, excluding the Employment Committee, have between 7 and 15 members. There's potential for inconsistency of decision making between North and South committees. And it is quite difficult to undertake mandatory training when you have so many members sitting on the planning committees, and also to undertake things like site visits. So some possible options in terms of the scope of the review officers are proposing is, obviously one option is to retain the 2 planning committees as we have at the moment, 2 area committees, north and south, to replace a planning committee with 1 planning committee covering the whole of the district, comprising fewer members, or replace the planning committee with 2 planning committees, one which considers major planning applications, and one that considers more minor applications, both committees comprising of fewer members.
So we have undertaken some preliminary research thus far, and the next few slides essentially demonstrate that Horsham District Council's planning committee structure is presently out of keeping with other local authorities across the district. So, for example, Ada, Arran, Chichester, Crawley and Worthing all have a 1 planning committee system with reduced membership to those committees. The only one in the district being Mid Sussex District Council, which has 2 planning committees. On the next slide, you can see that in East Sussex, Eastbourne, Hastings, Lewis and Rother all have a 1 planning committee system, again with reduced membership to those committees. And Wilden District Council has a 2 planning committee system. And further afield in Surrey, we have a number of local authorities with 1 planning committee system, being Epsom and Ewell, Guildford, Mole Valley, Reigate and Banstead, Runnymede, Surrey Heath, Tandridge, Waverley and Woking, with just Elmbridge Borough Council having a 2 planning committee system. So officers will be having a look to consider in more depth these items. So the areas for consideration principally are going to be, for example, the composition, so the makeup of any proposed new structure, how local ward members will participate, how the public and also parish councils and neighbourhood forums will participate in the planning process, the frequency and timing of any meetings, how and when mandatory training should be delivered, whether mandatory site visits be undertaken, and whether we have any pre-meetings for planning committee members. I understand this may be a common theme in other local authorities, but that's not something that we do presently here at Horsham at this moment in time. And then on our final slide, this is just indicative, a very indicative timetable at this juncture, and it sets out the steps that we would have to take as a council in order to come up and formulate a proposal for recommendation to full council. So we've previously taken this item to the Planning and Infrastructure Policy Development Advisory Group, and we're here this evening discussing the same. On the 10th of January or thereabouts, we propose to return to the Planning and Infrastructure PDAG for an update on the review. We then intend to hold an all-member workshop in order that members can be fully briefed and consulted upon any proposals on the 29th of January. And we then propose to return to both the PDAG and the Governance Committee to consider the outcomes of anything that which have arisen or been highlighted in those workshops, with the view that we will then return to the Governance Committee in May 2024 to make some recommendations up to full council for adoption in July. That concludes that presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. This document has been presented to us for our consideration of the scope of the review. And I don't know, I mean, I've got some comments, but I'd be quite happy to hear from the other members here if they have any comments. Councillor Bevis.
Yes, Joe. I understand how Horsham has got where it is, and I think the history of that is quite important, that going right back to when Horsham was formed as a district council, there was a lot of suspicion and animosity between geographical areas in the council. And I think that this system was a compromise, if you like, to placate people's fears and to provide a structure which allowed very local decisions to be made. So, in other words, all ward members were represented on planning committees that considered their ward planning applications. And I think that that's worked quite well. Yes, it's a bit ungainly. Yes, it's not very elegant, and it doesn't conform with what other people are doing. But I don't think anyone can demonstrate that it is actually broken. And I'm firmly of the opinion that if it ain't broke, then you don't need to go and fix it. So I think I'll leave it there for the moment. I may come back if something else comes up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Councillor Clark?
Yeah, I have several comments. One of the things that one has to consider is we're in a system where people get elected, and we go through a cycle of every 4 years people get elected. The thing that springs to mind is if you concentrate all the training and you put all the eggs in one basket of a certain number of councillors who are appointed to a planning committee, if at an election they lose their place, you lose all that experience and that breadth of experience that the existing system gives you. And basically you then have to retrain a whole load of people, potentially. So I'd be interested to hear that, how that would be addressed. Another question I have is, so what? We're different. Does it matter? I'd like to hear why it matters, because I haven't heard anything about it. And the third point I have is, how do you involve the members equally? Part of the review could create a system where you have some people who are more influential or more powerful than other people, and basically giving them the say over other councillors who are not on the same level. I'm not explaining it very well, but I think you're getting the gist of what I'm saying. And it'd be interesting to see that. Thank you.
Councillor Skip?
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, several things really. One is, it's a nice list of different councils who do different things. What does it matter to Horsham whether Elmbridge or all the others have a different system? I mean, it's actually what works for us in Horsham. We've got a large district, and I think that's been pointed out that it is a north and a south, and irrespective, that's quite important historically. I think that the question is, why are we doing it? If it's because it makes it easier for the officers, and obviously then that's a point of view. Unfortunately, the people who sit on the planning committee, irrespective of anything else, are councillors elected. And one of the issues is that elected councillors are expected to both represent their own wards, but also they're actually there to represent the district. And I think by taking out a good 2/3 of your councillors, all you're doing is creating another elite committee, and that actually is not what it's about. And so I'm sorry if there's a lot more work for officers on our system, but I think once you start taking out 2/3 of councillors, and after all, planning is our only other really major committee apart from the cabinet. We'll have a cabinet of elitists and we'll have a planning committee of elitists, and the rest of us will be sitting around twiddling our thumbs. And actually, it's all very well saying, well, we can turn up and represent our residents. Quite frankly, that would be an absolute waste of time, because the committee, because they're going to be so professional, will probably not be taking an awful lot of notice of the other councillors. And we don't have a vote, we don't have any way of doing anything else if we're not on that committee. So I've got to see an awful lot of hard evidence which tells me that this is something I wouldn't be that I would be happy with, and I think that the most important meeting is going to be when the councillors do a workshop. And I would ask that actually, when we do that workshop, the evidence that's presented is going to be evidence which is fair and unbiased, because actually it's quite important for the councillors and their residents. I won't say any more at the moment. I could go on, but I'm not going to.
Thank you. If I may just express my view on this, because it's actually the opposite, not the opposite, but my experience is different. I've chosen to exempt myself from planning for personal reasons. I've taken the training, which I feel is invaluable because it gives me the basis upon which, if I choose to come and speak on an application, then I have all the knowledge that I need to be able to present my view in support of the resident that I'm acting on behalf. I do actually take note of the applications which come into the council. So if I wanted to call something in, I would discuss it with my ward colleague, but also anything that comes forward on the agenda, so that I can choose to request to speak on that item as a ward member. So my experience is totally different to being on the committee, and I don't personally feel that I'm being prejudiced in any way. It's a little bit more onus on me to make sure that I'm aware of those applications that come into the council, that I do the training, and that if requested by the resident, I do come and speak. So that's my personal experience. In terms of the scope of the review, can I request, and I don't know whether you guys would agree, that the parish council, the neighbourhood councils and the neighbourhood forum, which is blueprint, so separate from the parish councils, their consideration of participation be separated out, because they are statutory consultees. And I just feel that we could then look at each of them separately, because we may come to a different decision on where they sit within the review. That's my comments on that. So, Head of Development, Emma, you'd like to speak?
Thank you. Chairman, just in terms of that last point, I think it's a good suggestion to be mindful in the review as to what bodies are statutory consultees and what aren't. Because my understanding is parish councils are a statutory consultee, but neighbourhood councils aren't, and the blueprint could be if it chooses to be, essentially. So that's a fair comment in terms of the consideration. Thank you for that. In terms of more widely, I think it's just, and thank you everybody for your views, is obviously what we're really seeking views for at this stage is have we got the scope of the review right in terms of what officers are suggesting we look at, and obviously the views on the merits or not of each scenario will come forward as the review progresses and as that consultation takes place. I think it's important to recognise, and part of the review will look at training, and you're right, Councillor Clark, it's important to look at training for those that sit on the planning committee, however many that might be, and if we are in a situation where not all members sitting on the committee, what training should those people be party to? Because I do agree any member should have a degree of planning training and an understanding whether or not you sit on the committee or not, and obviously that's something we can bear out through the review. In terms of why it matters, and I do agree, just because somebody else does something doesn't mean we do, but equally we should always be reviewing what we do. Is it right for us, and is it not right for us? And that's what the purpose of the review is doing. And I think we've set out various different options. We're not coming to the review with a set outcome. Obviously that was the outcome of the PAS review back in 2018-19, but that's not the intention of this review. It's to look at all matters as part of the review coming forward. But a common problem as the head of development, obviously the planning lead, I find at committees, is having all members on committee. Not all members are prepared, not all members have the time to read all of the papers, not all members come to the planning training. So I think it's perhaps the members here have that time, and I think it's important to recognise that to sit on a planning committee is quite a significant commitment, and obviously you would want members to sit on that planning committee that take that commitment seriously and are able to do that. So that's part of the reason, but you know, there are others in terms of risks, and I think it's also important to recognise, just because we haven't had an issue of one committee making one decision and another one making a different one, doesn't mean it's not a risk going forward. So I think we also need to be mindful of that in consideration. But ultimately, all matters are open to consider as part of the review. And also in terms of Councillor Clark's point about, I think it was Councillor Skip, in terms of representing local views. And again, that might be an outcome, and that's the outcome of the review, is that, you know, members want all members to sit on there. But equally, there, as Councillor Waters has said, as a local member, there are ways in which you can actively participate in the planning process and not be on committee. So again, that's something that the review will need to look at in detail, is what the different options are for being able to do that. I think that covers everything. Should any further points? No, thank you.
Okay, my understanding that this review, sorry, Councillor Bevis.
Sorry to come back, Chair. I'm not advocating this, but just to throw it into the mix for exploration. If a smaller committee were to be set up, which doesn't include everybody, then there is a risk of losing local knowledge if the member who is on the committee has to recuse themselves because they've got a personal interest, or indeed if they can't attend the meeting for other reasons. And I note that the county council, when they have committees, they have substitutes so that they always aim to have a full committee. And I wonder whether that's something, especially considering the importance of planning, whether that's something that could be looked at in the review process.
Councillor Clark.
I mean, come on, Chairman. We're exploring what the committee, what the review group is going to do. I would very much like to see statistical evidence based on these examples you've given of how many planning applications come to that committee, how many are approved, and how many decisions are taken in line with the recommendation of the officers, and how many of them are turned down. And I'd like a comparison with the statistics of our own committees, please, because that at least gives me some numbers, some evidence, rather than sentiment. Just be curious to know.
That sounds like a very good idea for the councillor presentation.
Yeah.
Councillor Skip.
Yeah, I think that Tony raises an interesting point there, that it would be very interesting if the ward members, if you've got a 3-member ward, may not be quite so difficult. But if you've only got a 2-member ward and one is on the committee and doesn't turn up, and the other one therefore has no say really in what's going on in the voting terms, that puts the situation under pressure. Now, we've got a lot of new members, some of whom can get to committees, some of whom can't get to committees. And I'm not quite sure at the moment, they'll only have done about 8 or 9 months on a planning committee, which is 8 meetings or whatever. So I think that it's very difficult for them to make a sensible sort of decision, even if we have a meeting in January. So I just wonder whether that's a good time to have a meeting. The other issue, I think, is that should members not be able to get to committee meetings, then they themselves can actually step down. So I don't think that one's ruling out a smaller committee if they decide they can't make it to those committees, and some people can't. I mean, I have a wider issue here that should there be members who can't really make a major committee like a planning committee, and it is a major committee, is it right anyway that they should be even on doing the council work? So I'm sort of have a wider issue. I know Paul will probably take exception of that one, and it's a hand grenade. But I do think that it's not a straightforward. Yeah, you're qualified. You've done the training. You want to do it. You do it. And somebody else who says, I can't get there. I can't get to planning committees. I think we need to think about it very carefully. So I'll be very interested to see what people feel. But I wonder whether the timing may be a little bit previous. The last, I think I'm right in fact saying that the last government's committee who were discussing this had one town member, and I think the rest of them were all from a different persuasion, different part of the county. And I just wonder whether in fact we should rerun the whole thing, but give it another year. Now, I don't think it's going to make any difference. And it might actually give people a greater appreciation of what is expected of them and whether they would want to go on the planning committee or whether in fact it's not something they feel they want to. But I don't think the time is, it's a very short time. I'd just raise that.
Thank you. Have any comments?
I think just to say, we have revised the timetable from the initial PDAG, so to extend it. We were seeking to conclude a review kind of by April time, but obviously it now goes into July to enable further opportunities for consultation, including the all-member workshop in January. To be honest, I think there's probably never a right time because there'll all be something happening. So I think officers' view is to seek to pursue this, but ultimately, if we need to have further engagement, then it can be an iterative process. Essentially, we'd rather have the time to get that engagement rather than pursue an early recommendation on it. So I think that's something that as officers we can review along the way.
Thank you. Are there any other comments at this stage? Thank you. I have no further comments. I understand this is for noting, and like Head of Development has asked whether the scope is, we have any comments on the scope. I've made a comment. I think we're all okay with that. Are we happy that it's just for noting at this stage and that it will be coming back to governance as and when required? Are you happy it's just for noting that you have no further comments on the scope?
Oh, I'm happy for noting, yeah. I'd just make a plea that we look at the timing.
Okay, so the next item. Thank you very much for coming. Head of Development is leaving. So item 6, polling places and polling district review. I'll hand over to the acting returning officer to talk us through the report.
Thank you. So we are required as a council to undertake a review of our polling places and polling districts every 5 years. Our last review concluded at the end of 2019. So we've undertaken this review and we're proposing that we rename the polling districts in the Cowfold, Sherman Broom, West Grinstead ward, following the parliamentary boundary review that's concluded, as that ward will be moving into the Horsham constituency. So that's just a simple renaming to bring it in line with the way our polling districts are named. We've also proposed 4 changes to the polling places. So in Broadbridge Heath, there's a proposal to move from the Bridge Leisure Centre to the parish office. In Den, the proposal is to use Park Barn instead of London Road Methodist Church. In Holbrook West, the proposal is to use the Youth Centre instead of Park Barn, and in Roffey South to use the Millennium Hall instead of the Roffey Club. The consultation period took place throughout October, and we received consultation responses as outlined in your agenda pack. We did receive some comments in relation to the Forest Ward, Unfortunately, there were no alternative, suitable, accessible venues that we could source. We also received a suggestion in relation to the polling district HKXC to move that to the youth centre, but following discussion with the ward members, it was agreed that there were issues with traffic and the parking situation, and there were complexities in relation to administering the county elections for that polling district. And then for Nuthurst, there was a proposal for 2 stations to be instated within that polling district. But given that there's very high turnout in that polling district, in fact, it had the highest turnout across the district in this year's elections, that suggests that it's not required, and we didn't receive any other representations in relation to the polling stations there. So the recommendations are that this committee recommends to council that the revised schedule of polling districts and polling places, which is set out in Appendix 1, is adopted for all future elections.
Thank you. Do we have any comments? Councillor Clark?
I'm glad to see that the Rising Sun and Nutbourne remains a polling station, is all I can say.
Thank you. Councillor Skip?
Yeah, thank you very much. I know I've raised this one before, but I still find it very strange that we've got polling stations out of the polling district. And in fact, in Forest, if I can just be a bit specific, it seems 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of our polling stations are out of the polling district. Can you just explain that to me? Because I couldn't quite understand why I was wandering off to one place and it's out of my polling district.
It's a real challenge within Forest. I've had extensive conversations with Colin. Councillor Minto suggested multiple venues, which either there was the Salvation Army was a suggestion. Unfortunately, they've got a daycare group on a Thursday, which they can't rearrange. We looked at the Stroke Club, but unfortunately, because that's on the site of one of the schools, they actually have to close the access gates at multiple points during the day, which unfortunately makes it impossible to use. So we're really open to any suggestions of venues, but we just haven't been able to find any suitable ones within each individual polling district. And we are able to understand it's not ideal. We are able to designate them outside of the polling district where it's not possible. But also at the last governance committee earlier this year, the governance committee did agree to delegate authority to the returning officer to make changes in between the review period. So we can accept this as it is and continue to review it. And if there are any future proposals that are suitable, we can take that forward in the interim period before the next full review.
Use your microphone, please.
If one comes up with something, what's the timescale for raising it with you before it has to be set in stone?
So for the elections that are taking place on the 2nd of May next year, we've got the Police and Crime Commissioner elections. We'd need to have firmed it up pretty much in January, because that's when we start sending information for poll cards and so on. But yes, please do send any through.
Thank you.
Councillor Bevis?
I'll just say that I'm pleased to see that one of the polling stations for Roffey South is moving to the Millennium Hall, which will reduce the pressure on the Roffey Club, which is used by all the voters in Roffey North. So that is a positive step forward, albeit that it's quite a way for some of the voters in the southern part of Roffey North to get to that polling station, but it's better than having lots of voters in one building. Thank you.
Thank you. There being no other comments, can we go to the vote to accept this report and recommend it to full council? All those in favour? Proposer? And Councillor Clark, seconder. Councillor Bevis? Okay, let's, it was a unanimous vote. Including me. Thank you very much. Right, item 7, urgent business. I have no urgent business. Does any other committee members have any urgent business? That's a no. So I therefore close this meeting at 18:07. Thank you.